Glad he was a fucking stud, dude.
Poor Titus. Was it that belly shirt, bud? What the? I remember playing that game when I was 12 and my dad would be like, what the hell are these guys wearing?
Hey everyone, welcome to Gaming Under the Influence. My name's Alex.
And I'm Mike, and we're coming to you from Green Dragon CVR in Woodbridge, Ontario, the only place you'll find the latest games to play and purchase alongside over 100 different kinds of Ontario craft beer, and we happen to be drinking one of them right now that we think is pretty impressive.
Yeah, what is this? Sugar Pants? It was your idea?
This is a lactose brown ale from Sawdust City Brewing Company, and we may have mentioned in the past that they're brewing a different beer every week this year, 52 different ones over the course of the year, in addition to their core lineup. This one's from a few weeks back, maybe a month or two, actually. It's called, I Swear, Sugar Pants. It was your idea. It's a lactose brown ale with cinnamon and vanilla, and it tastes a lot like a cookie. Yeah, and I think that was the intention. I don't know if you guys can see that on the can right there. It's delicious.
Very different.
Yeah, it's really good. It tastes like eating one of those rich Chips Ahoy cookies.
Oh yeah.
You know, to maybe my parched smoker's tongue. I'm not sure if it's accurate, but that's what I get out of this one, and it's delicious. Most of the beers I've tried from that 52 lineup, they're making a new one every week this year. I've enjoyed most of them, and they tend to make them in clumps, I guess. They made this brown ale and another one that was like a chai tea latte we tried once too.
Yeah.
They're all really good. You can try them here, of course. And
cool, man.
Yeah, lately, so, though we've been busy with Days Gone, which you can probably see on the screen behind us still, we've also taken a break to think about and dabble in one of our favorite genres. That'd be JRPGs, and
Japanese role-playing games.
Yeah, we got to thinking for the first time in a more scientific sense, like what is it that makes these games special? Never been forced to put it into words before, and we'd like to share with you what we've come up with, and then we're going to converse a little bit about some of the landmark titles of the 7th and 8th generations, up until today, up into and including things like Persona 5 and Octopath, and beginning with things like Xenoblade and Eternal Sonata in 7th gen. So without further ado,
take it away.
This is the state of the JRPG in 2019. Hope you enjoy it. So first, JRPG is a definition. And although the systems or the matter or the gameplay employed by game makers working in the genre have evolved, we believe that even modern JRPGs, we can classify them by these two components. On the one hand, simple menu-based gameplay conventions, or even simple, in comparison to proper action games, real-time combat like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy 15. And this is at the service of B, a conceptual depth and elaborate Eastern-flavored world building. And first, to clarify specifically what we mean by that, a focus on fantasy tropes and kind of cosmic themes, saving the world, light and dark, a prophesied savior. These games tend to be defined as self-sufficient wholes. They tend to function that way, rather. And it is hard to conjure examples of JRPGs inflicted by predatory business theses or political ideology. I don't know if you can come up with any off the top of your head, but
definitely not.
It's harder for me, yeah. This is true even of Western-developed games published by Japanese corporations, such as Days Gone and Horizon. Eastern flavor obtains even in the depiction of Christian themes or Western fantasy, like in Dark Souls or Final Fantasy 15. Depicted characters, at least by the conclusion of the story, are animated by an optimism and hopefulness characteristic of kind of like older Western fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, kind of replaced in the West by like grim, dark vibes in recent years. And why simple gameplay conventions to start with? Like, why is this special? Why is it desirable? And we think it has to do with something that's not necessarily specific to games. I think simple symbols, in this case player action, representing and inducing character reaction in the case of the games, or character behavior on the screen. We think simple symbols like this are best suited to the depiction of elaborate or profound ideas. When the illusion fades that the mode of representation and the thing being represented are the same, where player input is less equated with but rather taken as a sort of alphabet or symbol for character output, creators are more free to indulge in crazy world building and fantastical creative endeavors, the likes of which we find in, again, landmark titles of the genre.
Yeah, I feel like it really serves that purpose to show the fantasy and the grandeur of the worlds, right?
That's right, yeah, but I think it's specifically because the symbols are simple, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about why I think that's important. Yeah. I'm going to refer to somebody I've referred to before, this guy Mari10. I'm going to use his language here, but I think we can classify these gameplay conventions as uncircumscriptive symbols in relation to the objects that they depict. Here again, the gameplay is like a proxy or a substitute for the action of the character. It's kind of a deficient replication. It's deficient at depicting, at the level of the mechanics, the contents of the fictional work. And I don't necessarily mean this in a bad way. The illusion is totally dismissed that player input is equivalent to character output, and therefore, more abstract gameplay conventions, the likes of which menu-based combat facilitates, act to interface between input and represented character output, akin to language, facilitating the transition of concepts between minds, whilst the words used always remain unequal to language, which is kind of conventional or symbolic in relation to what it transmits. You know, as in novels or in literature generally, words of lowest extraction provide the best images, since there is a mitigated possibility of confusing the word or the sign with the thing it's trying to portray or indicate. And this is true of the relative mechanical simplicity of the JRPG. It enables the portrayal of rich and fantastic artistic conceptions. There's less of an impediment to the concept or form by the matter or the gameplay, by the requirement that player input materially kind of approximate character output. The problem ecologies are like the kinds of things you can do within the genre, the kind of things the artist can explore. They're not limited by the requirement of devising an equivalent player input for everything the character does on the screen. A primary or fundamental aspect of reality, therefore, something more like cosmic, something infinitely more than the individual piece of art itself can really shine through. That's right.
Opens up their possibilities, right?
It does, I think. It can shine through the select material appearance, unencumbered by the need to accommodate specialized gameplay mechanics of any, possible historic realization or preference. We can say of the JRPG maker, kind of like with the primitive carving symbols of things onto the wall of a cave, there's a preference to symbolize rather than imitate.
Right.
As something you pointed out to me just moments ago, the evident difference between objects depicted mutually in cutscenes and gameplay in such games demonstrate. Summoning spells in battle in Final Fantasy IX, for example, they symbolize what cutscenes depict as Alexander battles Bahamut, let's say, right? Obviously you're not doing the same thing in both cases, but the thing being depicted is the same, right? And you can signify that in relatively simple mechanics. I think that was a very good example. So the JRPG maker prefers to symbolize rather than imitate. He prefers kind of the reality in his mind to its common appearance, its concrete appearance, and is thereby freed from the pretension that his work has to kind of superficially indulge in a slavish imitation. He's not a slave of his mechanics or even of material requirements of any kind, really, when you think about it, right? And a contrary example might be that, more circumscriptive gameplay, contrarily, might involve, let's say, button presses in time with character behavior, movement when the character moves, or even actions that mimic his on-screen behavior almost one for one, like would be the ideal case in something like VR, let's say, right?
Of course, yeah.
Our argument is as follows then, where character output, the represented thing, must more closely approximate player input, or the thing being represented, the concept in the mind of the game maker will be limited by practicalities. That seems almost inevitable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The gameplay would not necessarily suffer, but
it would be limited. By what the person on the side of the gameplay can do, right?
Yeah, of course.
Rather than by what the guy can conceive, And in previous videos, we said that the sensible symbols, which are the matter of the medium of game making, and which permit players to attain a depicted subject in that medium, they extend to the operations of subjects that are being depicted. All sensible beings are kind of known from the outside in by their operations. A thing outside a knowing subject becomes known to him after kind of being seen or touched or heard, actions and qualities being a manifestation of what the thing is, its identity. A process of symbolism is apparent even here, even at the level of, normal animal sensory operation, which kind of shows it's delusory to pursue imitative art in the first place, because it's impossible to encapsulate in an artifact, much less in a sensory impression, like what the thing you're trying to represent is at all. It's better to symbolize, I guess I'm trying to say.
Right, yeah.
There's something natural to it. Even sensory knowledge functions this way. And in this sense, depicted operations of a subject, they function as the matter for an artistic form in video games generally, which the player engages in via the interface of the gameplay conventions. But JRPGs are further specified by this uncircumscriptive relationship of the gameplay as a sign to the things they're depicting via those operations as the thing being signified. The actions of the player do not need to closely resemble the operations of the depicted character. The player rather participates in character operations via substitutes or symbols or alphabets or proxies for what the on-screen personas are doing. They're separate things, at least behaviorally, right? An example would be the JRPG maker can depict his protagonist in a battle against like a titanic world-ending beast, via menu selections and top-notch animations alone, without needing to concern himself with how his physics engine will hold up, or if it can handle it at all, or how it will feel to control. His creative form is not so enslaved by the mechanical bounds of his chosen matter. I think that really is what makes an RPG. Yeah,
those are my favorite 2 points there. It's saying, how the mechanically the technology and the systems that are available to them, they're not so restricted by it, right? Like,
that's
as
right.
You're saying it's it's really freeing in a sense that you can let your imagination run wild with that kind of stuff. And I guess
I think so.
that's mainly because of the turn-based system in general.
I think so, or at least
We
the
can also-
simplicity of the system.
We can also apply that to 15
Yeah.
and to Kingdom Hearts. That
Even if you transition to real-time combat, in
Yeah.
comparison to a proper character action game or even something like Sekiro, there's a
where one-to-one inputs matter more
relative
in the
simplicity
moment.
to the combat. Yeah, and just to quickly compare these to CRPGs or Western RPGs,
classic.
older and newer ones, how they differ. And I think Western RPGs or CRPGs typically involve real-time combat, a PC-optimized interface versus a console interface in Japan. And it's, Japanese companies, from what I gather, are notorious for their kind of inadequate PC ports of their titles.
They've been getting better over the years.
Been getting better, certainly, but just as a reputation.
Some of the early Square Enix ports on the PC were not so
from
good.
software titles too. They just
even
didn't
that, Dark
develop
Souls
the
one was
PC,
not so good either.
Yeah, and they also involved more morally ambiguous characters, and I think most importantly, like a heavy D&D influence.
Right. Yeah.
They were like stat based down to the, fact that your attacks hit based on dice rolls, essentially, right? Virtual dice rolls. There was cooldowns, randomized loot. They were kind of the precursors to modern MMOs. And I think also, as the years have gone on, there's been much less change in terms of JRPG mechanics by and large. Like we still see things like Octopath Traveler, but in Western RPGs, though there are standout examples like Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2 and what's it called? The
Is
the
Dragon's
Obsidian one.
Dogma one
Pillars
of
of
those?
Eternity. Dragon's Dogma is...
What's that? I haven't played
It is got a JRPG soul, I would say, but it's more of a Souls-like game. Not Souls-like exactly, but that's
But
more,
more
of what it's going
actiony
for.
than.
That's right. Yeah.
Right on.
That's right. Yeah. Exactly. So where Western games have definitely progressed in terms of their gameplay and stuff, I don't think JRPGs really needed to.
I guess not. Yeah. Not as much necessarily.
Though even that might be like, just to not sound one-sided, when you play even something like Dragon Age Inquisition, you could still pause the game and pretty much take turns, laying out where the characters are on the map and like taking their actions one by one. So there is still an element, I guess, that resembles the kind of games we're discussing here, but the difference would be that the gameplay probably does not qualify as simple in the same way at all.
Yeah.
Not to grasp, not to operate.
I guess I would say some of these games on this list here have done things to sort of change up the traditional.
Certainly. Not to say there hasn't been any progress, but just to say like we still see
but
things
the
like...
core idea of like
We still see
they've
Dragon
made
Quest
tweaks
11 and
like
Octopath.
in Bravely Default, and Octopath.
Or even Ni no Kuni 2, let's say.
Even Ni
It's
no
like an
Kuni,
action game too, actually.
But I guess you're right. They all kind of sort of are just tweaked forms of what is essentially your menu-based combat, turn-based.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick look at a bunch of JRPGs we have listed here through this generation and the previous one.
Lots of good stuff.
You stop me, Alex, if you remember any of these games or if you have experience with them, fond experience you'd like to recount, or even negative experience. And
Not
there was
a ton of them, but I know where I'll stop you here.
We do have Lost Odyssey in 2007, one for Xbox 360. It was an exclusive,
Never played it.
part of Microsoft's original push into the Japanese market there. They published another one, Blue Dragon, too, I think.
Blue
in
Dragon,
that generation. I never tried,
I didn't
but
play these games at the time. I didn't appreciate them at the time when 360 came out, but
Lost Odyssey is fantastic.
Otherwise,
I
I
think
would've.
there was some ex-Final Fantasy personalities involved in that one, too.
Yeah?
in the
Yeah,
development
probably.
of the game, and it's really well written. Super. It's such a JRPG, man. The only difference is, I guess the art style would be like Final Fantasy 8 vibe, like more realistic-looking characters, or maybe 10. Maybe like Final Fantasy 10. I thought that one was great. The story was really cool about immortals, and
nice.
excellent game. Excellent turn-based combat.
Is that one on the backwards compatibility
It is.
thing?
You can definitely play it right now.
I'm
on
gonna
Xbox
give it a
One.
go.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. It was Last Remnant, which is also playable right now. I don't personally have experience with myself, but which was also critically well received enough for them to bother with a remake in this generation. And there was, of course, Xenoblade Chronicles, which I think is an especially interesting game. Like, to me, when I think of JRPGs, like, you have either the Squaresoft, like, high budget, like a super AAA JRPG, but these ones
There's
I find
room
like
for this
slightly
stuff,
more
too.
interesting. Yeah, because this is like
More
seriously a
experimental,
case
right?
where like the guys had, if you read into Monolith Soft and why they chose to even put the game out on Nintendo hardware in the first place, or why it was a favorable ecosystem for them to do so, it's because they had these crazy ideas which production on AAA hardware would have cost them knows?
they
Who
wouldn't have been
knows?
able to
Can you
fully
imagine
flesh out
the
their
world?
vision
Yeah,
on a
like,
PS4 or an Xbox One, right? It's
they didn't
just
have the
too much.
resources.
Yeah.
Who knows what it would have taken? So
Yeah.
they sacrificed some graphical fidelity, I suppose.
Yeah, for a more stylized look anyway,
Yeah,
right?
for more
Like a Breath
stylized
of the
look on
Wild.
lower power hardware to be able to achieve their vision.
Which I am not against at all. I think
like,
that's a great idea.
This game was great. I loved it in every way. It was definitely a great example of that Eastern flavor, dealing
Yeah.
with these like crazy metaphysical themes and even Western philosophy. A lot of references dropped to like Western philosophers.
Yeah.
Even remember Xenoblade or Xenosaga. That
Xenosaga,
they were
yeah.
called after Nietzsche books and stuff. It was out there. But,
That's intense.
I definitely think that's a persistent thing.
Yeah.
Eastern flavor involves these cosmic themes, these metaphysical preoccupations. But yeah,
It's cool
Xenoblade
that they're not
Chronicles.
afraid to touch on that.
No, I think so too. I think it's good basis
Yeah.
for fiction. I would certainly agree. Xenoblade Chronicles was great for that. The gameplay was kind of like an MMO, actually. It was
Yeah?
interesting. I
For
don't
the
think it's
first
my favorite
Xenoblade?
gameplay. Yeah,
I only
for both of
played
them.
2, and I didn't even give it a proper chance.
Yeah, that one's good too. But they
Yeah.
both have that gameplay style, like cooldown-based MMO style gameplay. So
Nice.
it's an interesting adaptation from Western combat styles that
Yeah.
we were just discussing moments ago. Eternal Sonata was worth mentioning too, I thought, because
Didn't play that one either.
it takes place in Chopin's mind as he's dying on his
Oh,
deathbed.
right, yeah.
The composer Chopin, who died at a very young age, I think 23. Brilliant man, protege.
Eternal Sonata. That makes
Yeah,
sense
the
now.
Japanese thought, it would be a great place to set an RPG in the mind of Chopin. All right, but
Yeah. Why not?
couldn't approve more highly. I did find it kind of like tedious to get through the opening hours of the game, but
Yeah.
it's worth pursuing just for its awesome like vision, man. It's a great game. And another thing worth mentioning is I don't think any of the games we have listed here reviewed under 80 on Metacritic.
I
barring
doubt it. Yeah,
perhaps
they were
like,
all at least
Resonance of Fate, I
well
think, had a
received.
72. But yeah, but in that,
if not critically.
yeah, well
Right?
received at least. Most of them over
Yeah.
80, some of them higher than that.
Yeah.
Some of them considered real like classic games. There was Eternal Sonata, interesting for that reason. Bravely Default
That was
like
one of my favorites
yeah.
when that came out.
Bravely Default saw Squaresoft reinvest in like this older style of games. Like they created these
Yeah.
studios specifically to make like old style JRPGs. It incorporated these new like braver default mechanics where you could kind of
Exactly.
hoard or sacrifice turns and to accomplish
Yeah,
your
it was sort of like a
objectives more
fresh
quickly. Yeah.
injection into a
Yeah, minor
a
like
turn-based
mechanical
combat, yeah.
elaborations, but
Yeah.
it was cool, and that we've seen that system pass into other things.
It's
since
sort
Bravely
of
Default. There
made
was
its
another
way
one.
into Octopath,
Yeah, it's an Octopath,
but
exactly like
in a
an
more
Octopath, yeah.
streamlined version where
Yeah.
no matter what, after a turn you get a battle
a point,
point, right? As
exactly, yeah.
opposed
It's
to
not about
having
sacrificing
to,
or gaining turns.
Exactly,
It's like
yeah.
power meters.
It was
kinda.
sort of just streamlined in
That's
there,
right,
right?
yeah.
Felt really good.
Mhm.
Love Octopath.
There was also Shin Megami Tensei. I played particularly 4 and Apocalypse on DS, which were awesome. Like I guess they were kind of like the combat was kind of like those old school Western dungeon crawlers, but they're super Japanese flavored, turn-based combat, like about samurais living underground who go and
Cool.
discover like above them is like a destroyed Tokyo, like infested with demons. It's really out there, really cool. Definitely worth checking out Shin Megami Tensei 4 and Apocalypse. I believe those spawned the Persona series, in fact.
They did, yeah.
There was also Resonance of Fate, which I personally haven't played myself, but I did observe my buddies playing it exhaustively, and always intended to myself. It's interesting because it has like this gun-based combat. Everybody's like a gunslinger, and it's got this like Western, like
Really?
I don't want to say steampunk, but a lot of like mechanical, industrial-looking architecture and people using guns and leather jackets and shit.
That's different.
Yeah, Western vibe. Interesting for that reason. That was the one that I think on this list reviewed the lowest at 72 on Metacritic, but from my
Which
knowledge,
is
it's
still
yeah.
a good score for a game,
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
amazing or great, but something you'll probably find enjoyment of.
Yeah, my knowledge worth checking
Right?
out at least for its vibe. Its,
Yeah.
art and
If
theme,
you're
you know?
into it, or
Yeah, there's the Tales
Whatnot.
series also, which I personally have very little experience with. Back in 7th gen, there was Vesperia. I think there was a remake of one of the GameCube ones. What was that one called? I don't remember.
I don't-
Symphonia. I
oh,
think.
okay, Symphonia,
Yeah.
yeah.
But those are fairly popular, also fairly well received, sitting around 80 consistently on Metacritic. There are a few outliers. That's the only one in this series that I'm going to bother to mention because again,
Yeah.
we don't have much experience with them, and I don't think that they're. I think they're competent, very good games, but nothing.
They're not
to them
the
stands
upper-
out to me personally. Yeah.
Echelon, if you will.
Ni no Kuni was a very interesting game last gen.
That was a great game.
Involved
I
into
loved that
Studio
game.
Ghibli in some capacity. I couldn't specify to you here, but it
They
was.
did all the cutscenes.
I see.
Yeah,
Very
they
cool.
did all the animated cutscenes, and they were so well done. It was phenomenal.
Tell us a little bit about it, man.
From what I remember, I didn't get through the whole game, but it was so charming and beautiful. Like I said before, the same way the PS1 had cutscenes that were graphically of much higher fidelity, then it was in a way a jump between the gameplay of graphics into literally like animation, like as if you're watching like a movie, like a Pixar movie or something more. I guess Studio Ghibli, which is who made it, right?
Great example of the way
fantastic.
that the mechanics in a game like that can symbolize something more than what you were actually doing.
They
at
were
the time.
so well done. Part of me wants to go back to that game to beat it, just to see all of the animated cutscenes. They were phenomenal, man. Like I can't say enough good things about them.
Definitely, man. Ni no Kuni 2 also was really enjoyable.
We should jump into that game and sort of try and just get through it to see all of that stuff.
I wish we could play it
Very
on PS4.
well done.
I would buy that if they made a remaster.
Yeah, I would too. Yeah. Such a charming game, just beautiful overall.
There was Persona 4 Golden as well, which I also don't have any personal experience with.
I did play that one as well. Then same thing, like just that Japanese flavor, man. Like the sounds, the music, the characters, like it was too long. I wouldn't have been able to get through it. I think I put in like 40 hours and maybe got halfway through it. So,
but even that one involves like mind hacking and stuff like that. Like I think like what I'm trying to get at, there's no mundanity in Japanese games, even ones that are about things as mundane as going to school and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
I like that.
And going
to
some
kind of like
randomly generated dungeons and just doing turn-based fights. Yeah, I see what you're saying. But no, it's fantastic. Everything about it is like I said, very charming and like flavorful, right? It's so nice.
Definitely. I also thought it was worth mentioning this one, though it definitely doesn't have Eastern flavor to it. But it's worth noting that Obsidian published South Park Stick of Truth, or developed South Park Stick of Truth, which was, for all intents and purposes, from a gameplay perspective, a JRPG, a turn-based RPG.
Which surprised the hell out of me when they announced it in that
I beat that game in like a day and a half. Really? It was so good, man. Yeah. So good. So good. Secret bosses like Morgan Freeman and Mr. Slave.
Didn't even know about that.
Yeah, it was excellent. Excellent game. The second one was good too, but the first one much better. Much better. Takes the cake.
I can see that.
Yeah. Persona 5 also, and getting into this generation, that was probably like I was trying to consider the first big JRPG that released on the PS4.
On the PS4?
Yeah.
I don't know what would be before Ni no Kuni 2. Was there anything before that? There must have been. Persona, okay.
Persona 5, yeah.
You said Persona,
There was I Am Setsuna and Lost Sphere as well, which were interesting. Coming from the same kind of...
I couldn't get into I Am Setsuna. I don't know why.
Yeah, I couldn't really get into them either. I like Bravely Default.
It felt kind of boring to me, but...
I did like the themes. Yeah. I never was a huge fan of the Chrono Trigger games in the past, so the gameplay was not as much to my liking as the more Final Fantasy-inspired Bravely Default.
Right, yeah.
And, the later Octopath. But those ones were also interesting. They had cool ideas, and they were fairly well received critically as well.
Yeah, they were, definitely.
Yeah. And then there's Ni no Kuni 2, the DS remakes of all of the Dragon Quest games from like 7 to... Those are good. I think 7 and 8 have been remade, actually, on DS right now. 3DS. Excellent games worth checking out. PS2 games. And there was Dragon Quest 11, which I recently played, actually. I just finished it in December or so, around Christmas. And
I should get into that one.
I cannot emphasize how much I love that game. I love it because it's an example of why, like... Now I think is a good time to answer... what's the state of the JRPG genre in 2019? And I think, like we were just saying, it's kind of funny because I think it's the same state as always. It's an eternal genre, and therefore it doesn't care about time or what people think of it, right? Like, and I think a game like Dragon Quest 11 is
just the way
it's going because it looks beautiful. The whole game, like, is so immersive and has a tangible, like, vibe that you can just close your eyes and recall instantly. It's so much flavor, just overburdened with like beauty and like awesome things to do and great characters.
All these games, eh?
Yeah, amazing. Yet they're so simple, man. So simple. Your interactions with the world consist in going through menus and walking around. Essentially, that's all you do the whole game.
Pretty much
symbolizes the action of the characters entirely, and yet it's perfectly engrossing. It succeeds entirely on the merits of the idea alone. I like that a lot. I loved Dragon Quest 11. I would strongly recommend anybody check it out, whether you like games or not. Even my infant son likes to sit there and rock it to the opening cutscene and the music.
It's going to be a heavy gamer,
hopefully. And there was Xenoblade Chronicles 2 also from last year as well, which I played most of and also enjoyed a lot of.
Yeah, I didn't give it a proper chance. One of these days I might restart it. We'll see.
Excellent also from the perspective of world building and stuff. Just like with the first one, I didn't quite like. I'm not the biggest fan of that style of like MMO combat with cooldowns and moving around.
Right.
But it is very, very
good. The setting and the characters. Like you said, world
for
building.
Those reasons, There's more Tales games like Berseria for the PS4, which my wife played Berseria, and she got burnt out by the... Like, eventually start going back to the same locations over and over again. And the story is, like, really, really highfalutin, but it's not as sublime as a Final Fantasy game. They're talking about all these, like, fictitious technologies and magical, like, elements and stuff, and it's like... it gets away from itself, it seems like sometimes she explained to me. But also notable games, also reviewed fairly well, sitting at an 80 plus on Metacritic, from my knowledge. Recently checked out something called Cosmic Star Heroine, a limited run published game we brought into stock here that it's like looks like a Super Nintendo JRPG. Yeah, I think it may be developed by a Western company too, but it's a JRPG. Essentially, I enjoy it so far from what I've played. We may insert some footage here if we have the opportunity. And then there are, of course, Final Fantasy 15 and the remakes
our two
of
favorites here.
Yeah, the remakes of 10 and 12 for modern consoles.
Octopath was fantastic. We've
Kingdom
talked
Hearts
about
as well.
that
Kingdom
before.
Hearts 3, yeah. And Octopath Traveler, of course. Octopath Traveler, which interesting again because of the way in which it apes not only like eternal conventions, but what can be the eternal nature of old school graphics as well. It's all about the art.
All the way through this
it's
game
all about
was
the
like
art,
low budget. You'd say, but
that's the perfect
so well
example.
done
like those
and
sprites
fantastic.
symbolize the
sprites,
characters.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's the whole thing. The objective is to symbolize, not to slavishly like imitate an appearance, and therefore you're free, right? You're free to do
and all
things.
you're left to sort of imagine on is, aside from the sprites, right? Is just the art that you see of the characters that are more detailed.
Every time
and
you
drawn,
pull up a
right?
menu too, it reminds you of their actual appearance, quote unquote. But it reinforces again like that sense that something is being symbolized here. Your imagination is where most of it takes place, but the symbol is still beautiful in itself, right? Like it's very materially competent. I loved Octopath.
Yeah, it was.
I still haven't finished it actually. I'm like 40, 50 hours in, and I've only did like 3 of the stories for each character.
I did all of the stories. I just haven't been the last, I
have to do chapter
true
4.
ending boss.
Yeah. Same with Dragon Quest. I
did all the
that
level
either.
4 bosses or chapter 4 bosses, but not the one final boss at the end. It's intense.
I think we should talk for just a quick moment about Final Fantasy 15 and the ways in which I believe it innovated on this description of the genre we provided you with in many ways, but it retained its essence, I suppose. Like the transition to real-time combat doesn't disqualify the game from being like simple, in terms of how it works. Like you actually hold down the sword button
you pretty
to
much
attack,
hold down
right?
either attack or what's the other one, block
That's
or dodge
right. You
or
do
whatever.
have to dodge at appropriate moments, but you could hold that one down too.
Yeah.
You could even pause the game
Yeah.
if you'd like. They inserted that because they were aware
Pausing
with
to use items and stuff. Yeah.
They were probably aware with how the action vibes of the game clash with the rules of the genre. And again, like Kingdom Hearts, I think this is true of Kingdom Hearts also. There is real-time combat, but the focus is not on mechanical complexity.
No.
It's put at the service of the idea. I think that's really what's characteristic of the JRPG. Yeah. Can incorporate modern, innovative gameplay conventions without necessarily betraying the essence of what makes a game mechanically a JRPG, right? Like even if it's like a man changing the color of his shirt. Like the transition from turn-based to real-time doesn't need to violate those rules.
Let us know what JRPGs you're playing.
Please do, Please do let us know. This is why we think this is a special genre. We look forward to upcoming entries.
Absolutely.
No major ones that I can identify at the moment.
Not off the bat, which is kind of sad, but I'm sure if we looked into it, there are some coming
There
out.
has been something of a renaissance, or at least the games have not been diminished in any way by the passage of time.
No, they're
They've
still
remained
coming
popular, remained critically acclaimed, they sell well, and we're very pleased to report that in this dark world that we live in. There's this, I'm sure they'd approve of the symbolism too, this beacon of light, the hero of light.
Is there any JRPGs on toxic masculinity?
No, there's definitely not. There is definitely not. Yes. In
Plus
fact, there's
one
probably
more.
JRPGs. You'd probably be hard pressed to find one where anybody's wearing a proper T-shirt, of the opposite gender.
Male
to
or
be
female,
honest. Yeah.
for that matter.
Never mind. Yeah.
Who's
male or female? Yeah.
Gladio, man. Gladio's a fucking stud, dude.
Or Titus. What's with that belly shirt, bud? What the? I remember playing that game when I was 12, and my dad would be like, "What the hell are these guys wearing?"
It's like, because him looking into that, he just has no idea what's happening.
No
He's
idea,
like, what
yeah.
is this?
He's like, he doesn't know it's Japanese. He doesn't know anything about that. It's like I don't know. I don't know. Waka and his hair and his. He's the only guy in that whole game with such an accent, if I'm not mistaken.
Waka?
Isn't
Yeah.
he? No, I'm sure I'm wrong about that. But when I remember that game, I feel like, why didn't anybody else have that accent?
Yeah.
Hawaiian or something. Very good.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I think that's going to do it.
Yeah, I think that's going to do it. All right, guys. This has been Mike and Alex.
Thanks for watching.
Gaming Under the Influence at Green Dragon. Have a good evening.